Shalom and good day all, this is Tehillim29 back again with another DC comic review. And in this DC comic review, I will be covering Dark Knights of Steel, issue 1 by Tom Taylor, the One Trick Pony. And last but not least, something from a better writer than Tom Taylor, Robert Venditti, on Superman 78, issue 3. So, now it's time to review Dark Knights of Steel, issue 1. So, moving in, the first things first, does this cover in any way, shape or form connect to anything that happens inside the story? In some case, it actually does. So, what did I give this cover for its actual rating? And it got a 7 out of 10. Now it's time to move into the internal art, which I'll show you some of the art around the beginning, middle, and of course the end. And this is some of the art around the beginning. I must admit, the person who did the art in this, I believe it's Yasmin. Fantastic work. She's also put out some real nice variant covers as well for DC Comics, which I have actually picked up. Alright, now to jump towards the middle, to which we have Kal-El and Bruce Wayne. And last but not least, towards the end, to which we get to see a death of someone from the House of El. Well, not in this particular picture, but in the page over it. I must admit that the art in this story was actually really quite enjoyable. From beginning to end, and Yasmin Putri did an incredible job with this story. And a big thanks to Yasmin, not Tom Taylor, for that. Moving into the art rating, I decided to give it a 7.5 out of 10 because it actually felt really good and consistent all the way through the story. Now for the story rating. Now, with this story, of course, with the story ratings, they also got to go through pretty much the grinder of things that I like to pick out. One of those things is time. So how did Tom Taylor go in the area of time? As you saw pointed out in the story, we got to see 19 years later. And I thought that was really good, and it also helped with the story. Now the thing is, he can be okay with doing it in the first issue. He really lacks in it in additional issues, or in other words, upcoming issues. And that shows a lot in his Nightwing run, as well as his Superboy Son of Kal-El run. And that's like a really good thing. Or it's not really a good thing that he lacks in it in those stories, when he shouldn't be lacking in it at all, and where the editor needs to get on his case. Now, what about locations? Because locations are important in the story. Because if you don't know where things are taking place, you get a confused reader because you don't know where things are taking place and why they're taking place in certain areas. Starting off with the first location being Krypton, and we have both father and mother of Kal-El leaving Krypton. And of course they arrive on Earth. We also have the Kingdom of the Storms, which is visited in the story. Of course, the Castle of El. We also go to a place called the Pullman, Hob Forest, which is actually towards the end, and Feist Village. Now, these locations play a part in the beginning, middle, and the end of the story. And we also get to see where, say, Bruce Wayne plus a couple of the other characters also visit within the story. The cast of characters consisting of Jor-El, Kal-El, and of course Superman's mother. It wasn't pointed out in here, but it wouldn't have hurt to include her name. We of course had Bruce Wayne, Nightwing. We had Spoiler, Black Canary, Harley Quinn, and last but not least, Green Arrow made an appearance, and somewhat of a Lantern type character, but we never got the name of who they were. So for the story, I gave it a 6.5 out of 10. Tom Taylor can give a good beginning, but sometimes he can slip up throughout the story. And for what happened in this story, okay, we got the death of one of the members of the House of El. Almost reminds me of Injustice, I must say. Just saying, it's too formulaic. And it's a formula that's going to need the change. To which I gave the story a rating of 6.5 out of 10. Now it's time to move on to Superman 78. So, as we return, we are back to Superman 78, issue 3. And let's start off with looking at the cover before the cover gets rated. And I must admit, this cover was absolutely amazing, and it worked 100% with the story and with what happened in the story. So for this cover, I gave it a 7.5 out of 10. But now it's time to move into the internal art. Now this is some of the art around the beginning of the story, to which we see Brainiac, Superman, Lois Lane, and of course the Brainiac robots, jumping directly to the middle of the story, and we get a big, huge surprise. This, I must admit, I enjoyed this so much more than the Tom Taylor story, including the story itself. And last but not least, some of the art towards the end of the story. Oh my goodness, this was absolutely amazing. I mean it, this story was absolutely amazing. So for the art, for the internal art, around the beginning, middle and the end, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Even though it wasn't as nice as Yasmin Putri's, I still enjoyed it in the story, so a 7 out of 10 is what it got. Moving into the story itself, of course, there's the main thing that I enjoy in my stories. Did we get any comic references to any of the previous issues? No, we didn't, but did it affect the story rating? Not at all, not completely. What about time in the story? Well, one of the things that we got in the story was something that was pointed out as later on, so it didn't point out where later in the day it was. It wasn't midday, whatever else, but it was just pointed out as later. Locations that actually showed up in this, we of course had Metropolis. We also had the Brainiac ship. We also had Bottled Candor, the Daily Planet, and we got to see what was happening inside of Bottled Candor. And last but not least, the Warehouse District. Even though I didn't get to show you the last page where the Warehouse District was, it's something that involves Lois Lane talking with Lex Luthor. So that's the only spoiler I'm giving you. So moving into the cast of characters, we had Lois Lane, Superman, Brainiac, Lex Luthor, Jor-El, and as well as Kal-El's mother. And this issue was amazing. And this is why this actually gets the story rating that it gets. Because in this story, we have Superman actually being thrown into Bottled Candor. And he gets to meet with his parents. Now, talk about emotional. This was fantastic. Now, looking at how Tom Taylor's doing his latest story compared to this, this is hands up the better story out of the two. To which I gave the story a 7.5 out of 10. Well, until then, let's keep it colourful and have yourself an awesome day.